This is it. The video that everyone has been asking for. We're celebrating the 2-year anniversary of the game Humankind. And ever since I started streaming this game and creating YouTube content for it, there have been 2 questions that have come up the most often from members of the community. Number 1, is this like Civ 6? How does it compare? And number 2, which game do you like better, Humankind or Civ 6? With this video, what I would like to do is offer my comparison points between these 2 games, and I will start this out by caveating I love both of these games. There is a reason that I play both of these games on a weekly basis on stream and create YouTube content for both of these games. This channel, my Twitch channel, started out as a Civ 6 channel. That is what I started streaming 2.5 years ago. We still play Civ 6 every Monday on the live streams. And Humankind I have been following since it was announced, played on day 1, and have been playing for 2 years since. I play every Friday and I play on the weekends, and then I'm creating YouTube content on top of that. Both of these games are among my favorite games of all time. I love both of them, but everyone wants to know Civ 6 or Humankind. And so, let's do it. Let's answer the question. I have 20 comparison points to answer the question, Humankind versus Civ 6. We'll jump in and I'll show you right away the comparisons that we're going to use. I've got a chart made up. We're going to go through this chart at each of these as quickly as I can, which, as most of you know, is not very fast. So here are the categories. I based them off of the 4X strategy genre. So we will have broken down into the explore, exploit, expand, exterminate, and then my beautifully self-created extra category. Within explore, we have map options in New World, starts, exploration, and resources. Within exploit, we have districts and improvements, infrastructures, wonders, and trade. Within expand, we have cultures and civilizations, cities, technology, civics, and religion. Within exterminate, we have diplomacy, war, combat. And in the extra category, we have win conditions, AI, multiplayer, and immersion. Now, this is by no means meant to be a complete list of everything that's important in a 4X strategy game. That list would be far too long. These are 20 specific kind of variables or points that I could compare the 2 games very easily and show how they could be compared with one another and that I had thoughts on for each game. We will rank each one, either Humankind being better or Civilization being better, again, in my opinion, and everyone's opinions are going to be different. And keep in mind, this is an unweighted system. Some people are going to weight some of these things very much differently than others. For some people, wonders are incredibly important, and so whether one beats the other, that might be more important than, you know, war for some people. But for some people, the war is what they play the games for, and so that's going to rate higher. This is an unweighted list, and it's an unweighted ranking when we tally up everything at the end. With all of that in mind, let's jump in to our first category under the Explore option, Map Options and New World. We'll start each time with Humankind and then work to Civilization 6 as I go through each of these. Map options in Humankind, there are just more of them. As you see here, you've got lots of different options between picking your number of continents all the way through to picking whether or not you have a new world. And there are ways to do that in Civilization 6, but the new world is like almost, to me in Humankind, an integral part of the play. And that, from an explore standpoint, and when we get into kind of really the exploration category as well, that becomes something that really drives and gears exploration within Humankind, and it's something that most games of Civilization 6 don't have unless you've set the game up to have that kind of new world feel. So the new world is something I think that Humankind really latched onto that really helped the exploration part of the 4X genre. That and just being able to customize map options, specifically all of the different details that you can do, and they've actually enhanced and released more of these over time from the Humankind side of things. You can choose now how large territories are in the water compared to in the land. You choose how much ridges and cliffs and elevation changes you want. You can choose how many rivers or lakes and how big those things are. The customization as far as getting your map set up the way you want to create different games and different kind of types of things happening in the world are vastly larger in Humankind than they are in Civ 6. On the Civ 6 side, you do get everything you kind of want. The beauty of Civ 6 is it's a very established game. They kind of know what to throw at you, and so you do get to choose enough, and the map variation is good enough in Civ 6 that you don't feel like you're missing anything necessarily as you're picking your different structures and your different options setting up a game of Civ 6. You always get vastly different maps, and you have tons of different map types to choose from as far as kind of setting up your game. Now, modded Civ 6, you can do a lot of crazy things with map choice and map construction, but for the purposes of this video, I'm really looking at vanilla with any official DLCs and expansion packs for both Humankind and Civ 6. That being said, for map options, I'm going to give this category to Humankind. And again, not that Civ 6 lacks necessarily in this, they give you what you need, but Humankind just has more options to really customize the map that you want heading into a game of Humankind, as opposed to Civ 6, which gives you enough options to really create those customizations, plenty of map types, but Humankind has more customization options in the map type and utilizes that New World feature that really lets them get that explore feature, I feel like, pushed to the next level in 4X games. Our next category within Explore is starts. Starts are something that in the 4X genre, I think are very critical. Everyone loves the beginning of 4X games. I won't say everyone, but most people love the beginning of 4X games the most of any like early game to mid game to late game section. Starts are so much fun. So much so, in fact, that in Civilization 6, rolling starts is probably half of most people's playtime in Civilization 6, and looking for that perfect start and that beautiful, that wonder start or whatever you're looking for in Civ 6. And to a degree, that's fun. Let's talk starts between Humankind and Civ 6. We'll open with Humankind. Humankind, the way that they begin the game is vastly different than the way that Civ 6 begins. The Neolithic era that Humankind presents you with at the start really, again, allows for that explore to be done at the beginning. You do not have to, and oftentimes won't, settle the territory or the area of the map that you start in Humankind, because you won't probably be settling your first outpost until turn 3, 4, 5. You won't be putting your first city down until sometime between turn 10 and 20 probably. And so you have options to really explore the land around you in Humankind because you start as a tribe that is actually going around and collecting food to expand your tribe, that is going around and collecting different science curiosities and hunting different animals at that point to get your initial stars in the game of Humankind. That creates such a different feel at the start than in Civ 6, where in Civ 6 you have your unit, your warrior unit, and you have your settler unit. And really, you're going to be settling your first city within 2 to 3 tiles of where you are. Yes, you're going to pick kind of which one you're going to settle, which if you're going to move a couple tiles away, so there's a little bit of that, but you're really not exploring very much except for the tiles you could initially see at the start of a Civ 6 game. You're going to do just a minimal amount, just a little bit to see if there's like a particular direction you might want to move your settler to put that first city down. And that's why rolling starts in Civ 6 is such a common thing, because you see what you're going to get right off the bat. So it really does limit that explore functionality to just loading new games in Civ 6, as opposed to in Humankind. You got to really play the game. You have to explore to see if the map is going to be worthwhile, and it makes that explore function, I think, better. In Civ 6, rolling starts can be fun. Like I said, people really enjoy that. But again, for the most part, I think I prefer Humankind. I'm going to give this category to Humankind. The Neolithic era, I think, was a fantastic way to start the game with its own really exploration-heavy kind of not city-based, like you're just moving around the map, figuring out where you are. It feels very realistic as you kind of kick off your game. I love starts in Humankind. I like starts in Civ 6 too, is my favorite part of the game. But starts in Humankind are just different. The Neolithic era is fantastic. It's so fun to play and really get that exploration done, just to be able to kind of keep the freshness of every game. Like as you're looking for like where you land doesn't state where you're going to be. You can go settle your new city 2 territories away if you want to, and it's not really even going to penalize you for doing that. So starts, I'm going to give to Humankind as well. Let's jump into a category I'm just calling exploration. I know that might sound redundant. We're in the explore category already. This specific one is called exploration, and I really mean for this to be exploration as in exploration throughout a game. So is exploration encouraged throughout the entirety of a game, and how is it encouraged? Here are my thoughts on Humankind. Humankind, again, through the Neolithic era, really encourages this. We'll keep that in the start section. But from an exploration standpoint, there are curiosity spawns that occur in almost every era. They wane away and pretty much disappear in the final 2 eras, but even in your opening 3 to 4 eras of the game, you have curiosities that spawn primarily on land to start with, but then as you start getting out into the ocean, more curiosities spawn, and you can actually gain gold, you can gain influence, and you can gain science, critical things in the game of Humankind, through finding curiosities. And in curiosities being available and spawning at different times, you're encouraged to explore in the game of Humankind much more so than you are in Civ 6. Now in Civ 6, because there are your tribal villages, your goody huts, if you will, you're encouraged to explore at the beginning of the game very heavily, and it makes it very important to get out and to find those things because they give you very nice bonuses over the course of the game. Your starts are highly affected by your ability to find those tribal villages and be able to execute on getting those things early game. But those are finite. They don't respawn. They just exist. And once they're all gotten, they're all gone, right? There is no further incentive to explore outside of course, the obvious things of finding wonders, places to settle around you, and then meeting all of the city-states or the civilizations that are in the game. All of those things are important, but exploration beyond that is not particularly encouraged. There's nothing else to make you want to do it. Again, plenty of exploration to be done in Civ 6. There's not like a lack of it. Definitely you want to explore, and there's plenty to be done in that arena. Humankind incentivizes continued exploration in a way that's a little bit beyond what Civ 6 does. They've built upon the concept of exploration throughout the game is, in my opinion, more incentivized. Maybe not more important necessarily, but definitely more incentivized by Humankind to keep exploring both in the water and on land. So I'm going to give this category also to Humankind. You can see Humankind has really taken to exploration. Amplitude did a great job of really making exploration a central tenet of the game. Let's jump in to the final category under Explore, and that is resources. I put resources under Explore because typically that's one of the real things that you're looking for, especially when you're looking for where am I going to go settle next, where's a next territory claim going to be in Humankind, where's my next city settle going to be in Civilization 6. Resources are an important part, I think, of exploration. Also, obviously, it's part of exploitation and exploiting those resources, which is why we're talking exploit next. But resources are critical in games of 4X strategy. They're critical in Civilization 6. They're critical in Humankind. Here are my thoughts on resources. In Humankind, there are a lot of different resources, very similar to Civilization 6. I think they probably have about the same number of different types of luxury type of resources, as well as strategics. They're pretty much the same in that way. Why? Because they are 4X strategy games, and you just don't get much outside of that. They're slightly different. The way resources work in Humankind with the stability bonuses and with having to put down extractors to exploit them, I think makes resources perhaps too important. You want them, and if you don't get them, there are substantial problems. And the same is true in Civilization 6. You want luxury resources, but your ability to trade for them and get them later on, it opens up a little bit more. There are not, I don't feel like there are as many necessarily of these resources, and you definitely, the way that the techs work to be able to gain access to different ones and different things, I do think that this is a category within Explore that I do prefer. I'm going to give this category to Civilization 6. I think that the resources and what they do is simplified in Civilization 6, and in a good way. I think Humankind tried to do maybe too much with their resources. The stability addition and then what the different resources do, they're not particularly balanced either. You get a lot of different bonuses from resources in Humankind, but the balance of whether those resources are incredibly helpful to you at different points in the game are very different. And so, in a way, the realism of that is really nice because different resources do different things, which is generally true in the world. And you get the same feel from Civilization 6, but it's just that when you find a luxury, it's a luxury. And yes, you're going to get different like themes from a Humankind standpoint. You're going to get different yields off of that luxury, but it's an amenity, right? And so you have this concept of amenities versus stability. This was a very close one, but I'm going to give the edge to Civilization 6 in resources. And I think that resource distribution also was a problem in Humankind. There's a lot of options for it, but the options for resource distribution in Humankind have probably caused more kind of issues than otherwise. And in Civilization, you don't tend to think too much about resource distribution. You go and find the resources you need. I've never really thought about like, oh, like this spawn is terrible because there's no luxuries. I mean, yes, it's always nicer when there's luxuries in your spawn. In Humankind, on the other hand, if you don't have luxuries around your spawn somewhere near where you start, you are in massive amounts of trouble. And I feel like that's maybe doesn't set up for as much of a fair, fun game as it might otherwise. Again, I love both of the systems, but I'm going to give this one to Civilization 6. That wraps up our Explore section. Of the 4 categories, you can see that the total score now is Humankind winning 3 of the Explore categories, and Civilization winning 1. So that wraps up my thoughts on exploration and the explore part of Fortix strategy. And so next we'll move into exploit. In the exploit category, the first topic is districts and improvements. I selected to put these together because I think they go hand in hand across both of these games. In Humankind, you can put down as many districts as you want. Emblematic districts are very fun to play around with, and I really enjoy the emblematic district idea, which is very much present in Civ 6 as well. Not everyone has an emblematic district in Civ 6 because some of them have unique improvements or other things, unique infrastructures even, that go into their particular civilization. Every culture in Humankind does have a unique district that you can put in. And so that emblematic district idea, I think, is very fun. It creates a lot of distinction. So the districts are good in Humankind. I have no real issue with them necessarily. Improvements, on the other hand, and how you improve tiles is very drastically different. So there is no builder that goes out to improve the woods or to improve a mine or to improve a hill or anything like that. None of that exists. You just put the right extractors in, or you put the right districts in that extract or exploit the tiles around it to be able to gain access to those FIMs. But there's not that nuanced ability to put a builder out there and improve your land and make it look better and increase the yields and make it beautiful doesn't really exist in Humankind. Whereas in Civilization 6, you have 2 components that I think they work really well and have kind of mastered, right? And that is, they have the districts are based off of their adjacencies, and so getting your districts placed just right and really planning out a city, that is much more important in Civilization 6 than it is in Humankind. In Humankind, you can slap down a bunch of different market quarters, and just get what you need from that, which is kind of fun in a way. But in Civilization 6, you're only putting down that one district, right? You only get one per city, and so now it becomes a critical component of reading the map, figuring out where to put things. The strategy, I feel like, behind districts is definitely, I think, superior in Civilization 6. Again, it's different, but I think I prefer it. That nuanced look of finding that perfect campus spot, debating whether or not you should put a holy site there or a campus. There's an enhanced strategy, I feel like, in Civilization 6. And then the builders and being able to improve tiles beyond just exploiting them with different districts. I think that is also a fun play. I like how it's done in Humankind, where the districts exploit the tiles around them, and then those tiles get increased yields, and you actually get access to those yields as well. I do find that very fun. But the idea of the builder and building different things to improve different tiles also is appealing. I'd love a combination of the two, maybe in Civ 7, or if Humankind goes to another version, that would be super fun. But for districts and improvements, I'm giving this category to Civilization 6. There's that nuanced strategy of placing districts and using your builders in the right way when you're working the right tiles that I think gives this category to Civilization 6. The other thing that you can build in 4X strategy games typically are infrastructures. In Humankind, infrastructures, in my opinion, are critically important and much more highly valued than in Civilization 6. Part of that is because of how the districts work, as far as they exploit the tiles around them. Then the infrastructures actually help you benefit those typically in some sort of way. Some of the infrastructures are tied to having different districts, which is very similar to the infrastructures in Civilization 6. But there are just more infrastructures to build, and the infrastructures are just simply better. The value on infrastructures is better in Humankind than it is in Civilization 6. I like that. I like that infrastructures are given a bigger role in Humankind. You actually have to debate oftentimes between whether you're going to put in a district or an infrastructure. And again, part of that is because you get to build as many districts as you want in Humankind. Whereas in Civilization, you're only putting down that one district of each type in each city, and you're not even going to put all of them down necessarily in each city in every game. So you end up with kind of a more nuanced look at districts in Civilization. Humankind gives you that ability to look at districts and infrastructures almost consistently across the board. So your strategy is less on my districts and whether it is, am I going to build a district or an infrastructure? I really enjoy the infrastructures in Humankind. I think that offers a nuanced strategy and approach to picking and choosing what you're going to put in, planning your cities around infrastructures. There's a lot of good river improvements. So if you find a good river, you're probably going to place things very specifically to take advantage of those river tiles. And that's because of what you're going to do with your infrastructures later on. All of those things, I think, are beneficial. And that's not to say that in Civilization 6, infrastructures are not important. They clearly are. They play a major role in enhancing each of your districts. Your city center also has infrastructures that you can build, and all of those play incredibly critical roles in your cities. Think about even things like flood barriers, where when you get to that point in the game, like if you don't have them, you may be in a great deal of trouble. There are a lot of infrastructures that play a huge role in Civilization 6. So again, it's not that infrastructures are not important in Civ 6. I just think that infrastructures in Humankind play a larger role, and there's more strategy behind them than you might find in Civilization 6. You can't tell already, I'm going to give infrastructures under the exploit category to Humankind. I really enjoy how Humankind does infrastructures. There's more options, there's more of them, and I feel like there's just a little more strategy behind your infrastructures in Humankind. The next category that I chose to put into the exploit section is called wonders. I'm going to dub this just all wonders. That's natural wonders, that's world wonders, those built wonders, and also wonders that are just naturally on the map. Let's talk about both of these at the same time. In Humankind, the way that you claim world wonders or built wonders is through influence. So there is no race to build a wonder. You actually claim a wonder via influence, and then you alone can build that wonder throughout the rest of the game. Now, you can only have one wonder claimed at a time, So you have to build that wonder before you can claim another wonder. But all of your cities can work on wonders together. And that is something I really like about Humankind, is being able to put all of your cities on a large project. That's something that that lacks in Civilization, that Humankind definitely has. But from a wonder perspective, although they've expanded and they have a large number of wonders now, and they keep adding to that list as the game gets older, as we celebrate 2 years, there's quite a few wonders in the game. The wonders in Humankind lack that push, right? That like, oh man, we got to build this one, we got to build that one, this is critical to my strategy this time. You really kind of just take wonders that happen to be best for you at the time. You're not really basing a strat, although you can, necessarily around wonders in Humankind. The same thing can be said of the natural wonders in Humankind. They've improved these over time. The natural wonders started out pretty lackluster. I'll give them this, their wonders are gorgeous in game, they look beautiful. The advantages of certain wonders, natural wonders in the game, are kind of so-so, and I don't feel like it's like hypercritical to go out and find natural wonders to settle on. The difference in Civilization 6 is natural wonders, and getting that natural wonder start where you have that ability to like really have an extensive advantage on your opponent because you've found that natural wonder, you've settled the city, you're taking advantage of whatever that natural wonder gives you, whether that's tile yields or whatever it is, I think is definitely superior. And on the built wonder side, you have this capability to race other people to each of the wonders. You always have a shot, but you never know, unless you're really exploring, who else is building those wonders. And so there's this, I don't know, that sense of urgency, that sense of letdown when somebody builds that wonder you're about to finish. All of those things are kind of missing from Humankind, to be honest. And so I am going to give this category to Civilization 6. I do think that they have done wonders in a really good way in Civ 6. Obviously, they've built on, 5 versions of the game to get those where they need to be. I'm going to give this category to Civ 6. I like wonders in Civ 6. I love wonders in Humankind too, but I do think that they're given a higher importance level in Civilization 6 as opposed to Humankind. The final category that I've put under the exploit section is trade. Now, trade is a critical component of all 4X strategy games, and it's a critical component of both Humankind and Civilization 6. Here is my issue. In Humankind, trade is actually so important that I think it's too important. The mechanics behind trade in Humankind and being able to trade with other cultures in the game, it's handled in a very strange way. You buy the resource one time. It's a one-time fee that you pay to create a trade route for a particular resource. That's always kind of bugged me just a little bit, because I'm like, well, the value of that resource might go up or down if I buy it now. It's like a one-time thing, and the only reason that you'd have to buy it again later in the game is if that trade route got broken through a territory changing hands, a trade route being broken, a harbor being broken, a road being disrupted. So there are things that will cause you to buy trade routes again, but when you trade for things in Humankind, the value's not there from the gold that it costs, the money that it costs to do so is disproportionate to the importance of trading. Trading in Humankind is ridiculously important, but then doing it is seems like they've placed less importance on it. And so I have this conundrum where trading is really fun in Humankind because it's necessary and very important, because it gets you things like stability and access to luxuries and huge bonuses to your FIMs. It's critically important, but then you only trade the one time for a resource. It's very interesting to note how that all functions and how that works. On the other hand, in Civilization, trade is handled a bit differently. I don't think that trade is as important as it is in Humankind, but that every 30 turns, or the ability to do one-time trades versus turn-based trades of gold and different things, and you can do some of that in Humankind now as they've kind of improved the game, but Civilization takes trade and I feel like has a balanced approach to it. You have access to certain resources, you trade access to those resources on a very specific way. The other thing that I think Humankind does that maybe is not great is you don't have nuanced control over what you're trading. If you sign a luxury trade agreement, they can buy all of your luxuries. If you sign a strategic trade agreement, they can buy all of your strategics. In Civilization, you handle it on a resource to resource basis. If you want to trade iron, then you trade iron and just iron, and you can trade them only to the cultures you want to trade them to, and you set the price based on value. The trade mechanisms in Civilization 6, I think, are definitely superior to Humankind. So I'm going to give this category to Civilization 6. This was actually a pretty easy one for me. It's one of the first ones where I've been like, yes, Civilization 6, the trade mechanisms are much better on Civilization 6 as opposed to Humankind. I like some of the stuff Humankind is doing, but Civ 6 has definitely got it made when it comes to trade. That nuanced control is definitely something that you're looking for in your trade. As you can see, that wraps up the exploit category, and we have now, as we add up the rest of our totals, Humankind scoring 4 and Civilization 6 scoring 4. So while Humankind kind of took the category of explore, then Civilization 6 comes back and takes the category of exploit. And so we're all tied up after 2 sections, 4 to 4. This brings us to the expand category in our list. I've made this the biggest category, and that's mainly because I chose to put cultures and civilizations as the start point for expand. Does it fit with expand? Maybe. You can argue whether that would go into another category or not. I chose to put it here. Let's talk about the major difference, and probably the biggest difference, between Humankind and Civilization 6. In Civ 6, you pick a civilization, you play as that civilization for the entirety of the game. In Humankind, it is drastically different. In Humankind, you choose a new culture each era of the game. Once you're out of the Neolithic and into the Ancient, you pick your first culture, and then every era beyond that, you pick a new culture, and you blend those cultures together into kind of an empire-wide, like your empire. It's very personalized, and it makes the game very different every time you play it. You can choose to go different routes. You can be blocked from different routes because somebody else moved up and took that particular culture. The unique traits that these cultures give you follow you throughout the course of the game. So the culture you pick in the Ancient era, they have a unique trait that will be added to your empire. Each one does. And that trait will follow you through the rest of the game. So you can actually create very interesting combinations of these traits throughout the entirety of a game to match your playstyle, or to match the map that you're on, or to match whatever your goal is for that particular game. It's a lot of fun to be able to mix and match these cultures together, or transcend and stay with the same culture but get a fame gain bonus. They've really thought it out quite well from the Humankind side. The cultures that you get to choose moving up have expanded. They've done a great job with DLCs and expansions to bring really interesting, unique, and fun cultures into the game. The one caveat I have about Humankind cultures is that there are some cultures in Humankind that are just not good enough. There are some that are maybe a little too good. They've done a pretty good job, Amplitude has, of bringing those back down into line. But the one thing they haven't done is take some of the cultures that are just almost never going to be picked and giving them more of a reason to be picked. So there's a little bit of imbalance there. There's always going to be some level of imbalance. There's a couple that I feel are like actually like egregious, like no one would pick this. There's no reason to do it. And so you get some of that going on, but there's so much variation in the cultures, and it's so cool how they blend and mix together all of the different strategies that you can do between one to another, and different strategies you can come up with playing across the whole game. I really enjoy the cultures in Humankind. On the Civilization 6 side, you pick your civilization. They have specific bonuses, just like you do in Humankind for each of the cultures. But those are the bonuses you have throughout the entire game. You're one civ, you play one civ the whole time, and that's that. That allows the game to be balanced better, but it also doesn't allow for that nuanced strategy that Humankind allows for of changing cultures. I prefer the Humankind route. I think that it's a lot of fun to be able to maneuver around through that. Now, Civilization 6 gives you a ton of different options for civilizations at this point. Ever since the advent of the Leader Pass and even all of the DLC content prior to that, there are a lot of civilizations to choose from, and they're all unique, and they're mostly balanced pretty well. People will argue against that, but they create different ways to play the game. There's not like an egregious, like, oh, no one would ever pick that necessarily. There might be an argument for a couple in Civilization 6, but because there's different win conditions and different things you can push for, there's always a little bit of balance there in Civilization 6 that doesn't particularly exist in Humankind necessarily. There's also no incentive or less pressure to move through the eras in Civilization 6 as opposed to Humankind, because in Humankind, part of the strategy is, well, when do I move up to the next era? When do I pick my next culture based on, well, do I have a culture I want? Or do I want to sit in this era, gather some more stars? And again, that's a very drastically different component of the game we'll talk about towards the end. But I am going to give this category to Humankind. I love the fact that you move up and choose different cultures every time. There's a nuanced strategy to that. It creates a lot of uniqueness within each game. I love Civilization and the cultures they've chosen and how many of them there are, but the Humankind way of getting different traits and emblematics, and it keeps the game fresh throughout, knowing that you get something different at each era to build a unique unit, a unique district, and strategies to synergize with. It's a lot of fun. The next category under Expand is cities. Cities are another kind of critical difference between Humankind and Civilization 6. You can see that this Expand category is very important as far as differences between the two games. In Humankind, you have territories in which you place cities into. In Civilization, you have cities that you place that then expand to cover territory. Humankind's method of pre-breaking the map into set territories, which you can actually now customize the size of, is very appealing. It has kind of a realistic feel to it. Maybe the realism is more like a modern feel, or maybe like, you know, mid feel from like a time standpoint. Territories were often claimed that way, right? Especially when you think about the New World and how countries were formed and different things of that nature. You've got a lot of like natural boundaries formed, kind of territories that would be claimed by people, particularly during that period of time when people were out exploring and claiming new land. Whether that land was actually new or not is another discussion entirely. But those things oftentimes were driven by river borders, mountain borders, territories, and the game does a really good job of creating territories that are interesting and typically that make at least some amount of sense. You can obviously make them a little more chaotic in the game settings, but for the most part, these territories are really well done. And I like the idea of claiming a territory and then establishing that those are your borders and having to defend those borders. Whereas on the other side of things in Civilization 6, when you plop your city down, it starts with, you know, your surrounding tiles and it builds out as your culture grows, right? So your culture number, right, goes up and then you expand throughout the land and you get to claim new tiles. One of my biggest problems with Civilization 6 is that you don't get to choose the tiles that you grow out to. You can purchase certain tiles if you want them, but the natural growth is randomly chosen by what the computer has determined is the next best tile to grow to. But oftentimes it might not be actually the tile you want to grow to. And so that level of, that takes away that nuanced control. If they give that control back maybe in Civilization 7, I think that would be really advantageous. But they don't have it in Civilization 6. You just kind of grow. And then you're going to put another city down. And you're going to put another city down. There's another large difference between Humankind and Civilization 6 is that in Humankind, if you end up putting down, let's say 5, 6, maybe 7 cities, that's probably going to be enough cities to win a game because you're attaching territories to those cities. Each city that you put in a territory, you can then add different territories to that. Those are just administrative centers of that same city. And so the city becomes this wide swath of land, almost like like a state or a province within your country, and so you have different administrative centers that almost function as like little mini cities throughout the land. But then your main city, your main hub, is in just one territory. I really enjoy that methodology. The Civilization 6 way of doing things is also fun. You get more cities to manage. You end up with, 15 cities is, more likely what you're going to see in a game of Civilization, in that 10 to 15 range. Civilization 6 being a game that we're going wide is definitely better than going tall for the most part for most of the civilizations. And so you end up with more cities to manage. Eventually those cities end up kind of connecting to each other through your borders, expanding via culture and different things like that. I just happened to, this one was kind of a toss-up, to be honest. I just happen to like the way Humankind does it with the territories and attachments a little bit better. I think there's some nuance there. Planning out your empire still happens, just like it does in Civ 6, where you're planning where to put your cities. You're also planning where to put your cities and which attachments to make in Humankind. So you get the same feel, but the territories give it kind of a fun approach of picking where you're going to go, how that's going to happen. Your borders are already kind of pre-established. It doesn't rely on like random expansion into those. Exploiting those tiles is completely different. And that's where the games take this turn from each other, where I love the fact that they're both 4X strategy. They both have a lot of similarities, but because of the way they're constructed, because of all of these small nuances and differences that we're talking about, they play very differently. And so you can't say like, oh, like civilizations just do territories. They'd have to change so many things to do that. Or you can't say like, oh, Humankind should just do cities that grow. It wouldn't work because the exploitations don't function the same in both of those games. So that makes them really fun to play together. That's why I play both of them simultaneously on different days of the week, because they're both fun entries into this genre of 4X strategy. The cities and territories are one of the things that kind of really define that, as far as like the differences that create them both being 4X strategy, both being different but very fun to play. I'm going to give the cities category to Humankind. I like the territories look. I felt like it was a nice feel. I don't like some of the nuanced stuff about how cities work in Civilization as far as expansion is concerned. So I like the territories idea in Humankind. Again, very close category. Technology is our next expand section. The tech tree in 4X strategy games is relatively the same across almost all 4X strategy games, depending on the time period that said game is set in. You'll notice that the tech tree is very similar across Humankind and Civilization 6. They function very much in the same way. In Humankind, the tech tree sets itself up such that, yes, it branches, and yes, there are some forced paths to get to some other things. It crisscrosses a lot. The tech tree in Humankind crisscrosses a lot, so there's a lot of ways to get to different techs, whereas in Civilization 6, you have more of a kind of treed approach. You have two requirements in order to get to a single tech, whereas in Humankind, there might be two ways to get there, but both of them aren't required, only one of them is required. So in Humankind, you might get a little bit more of a free-flowing feel, whereas in Civilization 6, there is, I think personally, a little bit more strategy, and hence this is a 4X strategy genre. There is more strategy in Civilization 6 in the tech tree than there is in Humankind. I feel like you're often looking at the Humankind tech tree going, cool, what's the next thing I need? And you just click it, and you pretty much get there. Whereas in Civilization 6, you're looking ahead, you're planning out paths to get to techs you need, you're planning on how do I boost that, right? That's the other big thing that Civilization 6 has that Humankind does not. They have those tech and civic boosts built into the game, which does make a lot of sense as well, so I really like that. I am going to give technology to Civilization 6. The tech trees are very similar, but I think the way that Civilization 6 does their tech tree makes it more strategic, makes it a little more nuanced for picking how you go, where you want to go, and making decisions more strategic in the 4X strategy genre is definitely something that most 4X gamers are looking for. And so Civilization 6 wins the technology category for me. Let's talk civics. Civics are one of the other major differences between these two games. In Humankind, you have a completely separate civics tree that branches out and does completely different things. There's not a culture number that you earn to unlock. It doesn't function exactly the same as the tech tree. Whereas in Civilization 6, you have your culture tree, your civics tree is basically laid out in the exact same way that your tech tree is, only you, instead of earning science to progress in that tree, you earn culture to progress on that tree. There's nothing wrong with this. This is very standard operating procedure. But what I want to say is Humankind gives you a different take. It gives you this sense of realism. I really enjoy the Humankind handling of civics because it's based off of how you play the game. You have these axes, 4 different axes that you could look at that you push towards different bonuses that your empire will have based on decisions you make in the game, and that impacts the different civics that you actually unlock throughout the game. Actually takes actions in game to unlock those particular civics. You don't get them by just earning a culture number. You have to do certain things in game that make sense to unlock particular civics that you can then enact for your civilization, for your culture, for your empire. That nuance of being completely different from the tech tree, I think in my mind automatically gives this to Humankind. The fact that civics are based on in-game events and how you make decisions, and you have these new axes that can benefit different things, it's a much more nuanced approach. It's a much more strategic approach than Civilization 6 takes, which is just a replica of your tech tree, just looking at civics. You have a lot of things in Civ 6 that I really like, such as governments, which do not exist in Humankind. Your government in Humankind is created by the civics you enact, which is in a way very accurate. You don't have cards and things that you're putting in that Civilization 6 has. So there's a lot of differences here on the civics side of things that occur between these two games. Just happen to like the way Humankind does it by making it based on in-game actions and having you swing on these different axes. I think that that's a very unique way and a unique take on it. And I feel like Civilization 6, it just feels like the tech tree only for civics. And you do get the governments and you do get the cards and other things that go into play there. I love that in Humankind, you don't have to like just limit yourself to like, oh, I can only put 3 cards in right now for my government or 3 cards for something. Like, no, just take actions in the game that will dictate the type of basically government that you're running, right? How is your empire being run, and gives you different bonuses based off of that. Both are great. Both work really well for the genre. But I like the way Humankind does it a little bit more, just getting into something different, doing it differently, and making it very distinctly separate from technology and how technology works. So I'm going to give this section to Humankind, civics, uniquely done in the game of Humankind. The final category in Expand is religion. Religion in Humankind is, and I'm just going to put this very frankly, confusing. It doesn't make a ton of sense. The value is really good early game, and then there is no value almost to religion late game. And so the ability to gain faith and push your religion out in the early game becomes very important. You get access to different tenets, which really do benefit your empire. But once you have all the tenets, which typically honestly happens in the opening like 60-ish probably turns of the game, you actually have all of your tenets. There's not really, outside of generating grievances for war-related purposes or other things, there's not a lot of incentive to keep religion going. Now, late game religion gets kind of a little bit interesting, maybe if you start to play around with like irreligion and a couple different civics that you can get to. But religion in Humankind is very confusing and not particularly rewarding in the long term. On the other hand, in Civilization 6, religion is very competitive. Religion is lasting throughout the entire game. Faith is actually a currency you can use to buy things, which is not something they have in Humankind. So drastically different in that regard. And there's an entire win condition based around religion, which Humankind simply does not have. Religion is much easier to understand in Civilization 6. It has mechanics like spread and missionaries and apostles that go out and actually do things. Religion is much more thought out in Civilization 6 than it is in Humankind. This one was pretty easy for me. Civilization 6 easily takes the religion category just on the fact that it makes more sense, there's long-term value, and there's an entire win condition attached to it. In Humankind, you don't even get fame, which is the which is like the winning way in Humankind. You don't even get fame based on religion, almost at all. I think that there are some tweaks that Humankind and Amplitude needs to make to religion to kind of bring religion back around to being more important and being a critical portion of the game. Civilization 6 definitely takes this category. And that brings us to the end of Expand, and you can see that it is neck and neck. Humankind now has taken 7 categories. Civilization 6 has taken 6 categories, and so we stand at 7-6 heading into our final 2 sections. The last of the 4 X's in 4X strategy is Exterminate, and the first portion of that we're going to talk about is diplomacy. The interaction with the AI and or with other players if you're playing multiplayer and all of that, nuances of that. In Humankind, diplomacy plays a critical role almost on a regular basis because you're negotiating for different treaties. You are now, with the advent of the embassy, you have different embassy-related treaties you can also employ. There are a lot of diplomacy options within Humankind. You sign trade agreements, you sign agreements that get you access to more science, more culture, obviously your open borders, all of your different war-related things. All of those things happen through the diplomacy screen in Humankind, and there is a lot more you can do in Humankind from a diplomacy standpoint than you can in Civilization 6. It's not that diplomacy doesn't exist in Civilization 6, it certainly does. You're still interacting with the AI. Most of your interactions with the other players in the game in Civilization 6 center around trade. They don't really center around treaties or diplomacy as much. There are definitely things that you want to be doing in Civilization 6 from that standpoint, negotiating for open borders, generating good relationships with them based on the different actions that you take within the game. But most of that is done from like base personalities of the different characters or whatever your friends are if they're playing with you, as opposed to in Humankind where diplomacy, there's a lot of agreements. There are a lot of trade things that you're doing from an agreement standpoint, not a trade standpoint, which we already went over, but you're making a lot of treaties. You're making a lot of agreements with different people in the game to really further what's happening. They've got a whole system on collecting diplomacy. Diplomacy is actually a category now, like it is a fame category. You earn diplomacy points, much different than you do in Civilization 6. Humankind has taken diplomacy to the next level, in my opinion, as opposed to Civilization 6 where it exists and it's useful, but it's not something that's a central tenet to the game. Diplomacy now in Humankind, after they came out with the expansion that added in diplomatic cultures and all of those things, and diplomacy as a fame category, as an earnable, that has made diplomacy even bigger and even better in Humankind. So this category goes to Humankind. Diplomacy done really well in Humankind. There's just a lot more to it. It's more nuanced. There's more strategy behind it in the game of Humankind. The next category is war, and this is a really big one. War is, despite the fact that 4X strategy games, war is only like one of the X's, war tends to be a very large X. It's one of the biggest of the 4 X's in most people's mind. In Humankind, a very, like, almost ultra-realistic take on war was implemented. There is war score, there is war support, and it's not that those things don't necessarily exist in Civilization, they do to a degree, but in Humankind, you have to have enough war support from your population to declare war. You don't just have to have reasons to declare war, your population actually has to support your war, and there are ways to do that. Throughout a war, you have to earn war score in order to be able to claim different things off of your opponents. This is where Humankind gets moderately frustrating for quite a few players. They've made changes to war in Humankind where you can push beyond. If your opponent's war score goes below 0, you used to have to surrender what happened. It just happened, and you had to accept whatever terms ended up being on the table. And you could change what those terms were, but you had a certain war score that you were spending to get different things. And sometimes you could capture a city outright, have that city, and then get to the end of the war and not have enough war score to be able to actually keep that city as a result of the war. Those types of things I think players find very frustrating in Humankind, whereas in Civilization 6, war has a less realistic feel, but it has a more fun take. You can declare surprise war. Do you get penalized? Certainly, you do. Is the penalty really something that anyone ever thinks about? Not really. Whereas the penalties in Humankind, you definitely think about. I love that Humankind took a hyper-realistic approach to this, but I think that there needs to be some leniency on allowing players who really want to run just like an exterminate game where they want to go to war and they just want to war people. You could do that in Civilization 6, and you can't do that in Humankind. Some of the mechanics in Humankind War get a little bit confusing and a little bit frustrating. You're trying to figure out, why is my war score so low? I've been winning all the fights, but there's all kinds of calculations that go into war score. And then you don't end up getting the city that you took. And then you're like, well, I should have just burnt that city down, which makes no sense realistically. So in the fight for realism in Humankind, you almost lost realism on the backside of it when a war actually ends. I like all of the thoughts behind this, but the execution just isn't quite there for Humankind. Civilization 6 takes a very like old school war happens and you can go to war for as long as you want. Yes, there might be some war weariness penalties. They're not really very impactful. And you just wage war in different ways. It does impact your diplomacy, which is minimal. And your World Congress types of stuff, which again is kind of minimal in Civilization 6. So war just kind of is an inherent part of Civilization 6. It's straightforward, it's easy to understand. You take a city, the city's yours. Unless you give it back to them as part of like a surrender condition, right? But that city is basically going to be yours. That's not true in Humankind. I feel like, as far as war is concerned, Civilization 6 takes the cake here. This one was not, again, not a difficult one for me. Civ 6 wins the war category. And because of this, I think is why a lot of people would say that they prefer Civ 6 over Humankind. War is weighted very high on most people's 4X strategy, conundrum of things that they're thinking about as far as importance level within the game. In that way, if you're a war person, Civilization 6 just might be your game as opposed to Humankind. I'm not a war person, and so this doesn't weight highly for me. And again, we're trying to go unweighted here. But I think that a lot of people prefer Civ 6 over Humankind almost solely based on this one category, because Civ 6 does kind of, for me, take the cake on this. Unless you're looking for hyper-realism in your wars, then Humankind might be your cup of tea, But we're going to give this category to Civilization 6. That takes us to our final in Exterminate. Our final section is Combat in Exterminate. Combat, this one was also easy for me. Humankind takes combat and battle management to a whole nother level. It's almost a mini game within the game itself. The ability to control units uniquely, put them into an army, and then once the battle actually occurs, to have those units all be able to spread out across the map, take different positions, strategize your battles as far as high ground, low ground, on river, off river, all of the different bonuses you can get, all of different unit types, horses needing to be a tile away when they charge. There's so much nuance to the battle management system in Humankind that make battle exciting. It makes battle fun in Humankind. You get to stack armies together, which thank goodness you do, because when you talk about combat in Civilization 6, you get into the idea of my one unit of tanks, I can only have one unit of tanks on a hex. Hexes represent large swaths of land, and the fact that you can only put one tank and then your infantry has to be on a separate hex, it just has never made sense to me. It just is breaking realism. So I love in Humankind that you get to stick your units into an army, and that when a battle happens, that army then gets to spread out and you get a full battle management simulator basically to decide combat. It works really well in Humankind. Civilization combat frustrates me because you build this army and then half your units might not even be able to like get in and do anything in that fight. The idea, even in a multiplayer game, the idea of this battle management goes so much better because it's not who clicked faster, it's who strategized the best in your battle management. This was another very easy category for me to decide. Combat in Humankind is by far and away more interesting, more fun, and much more nuanced from a strategy perspective than it is in Civilization 6. you're looking for something super straightforward and super simple, Civilization 6 is going to give you that from a combat perspective. But if you want actual battle management and kind of almost like a near mini game as far as turn-based combat is concerned, Humankind gives you that, and it is a lot of fun, both on land and in the water, strategizing those fights, putting your armies together, how you balance who's where, and it's a lot of fun. Attacking cities is very interesting, all of that stuff. I think Humankind takes the cake on the combat part of things. That wraps up our Exterminate section. And you can see, whereas there were some pretty clear winners in this section, the totals now are Humankind standing at 9 total categories, Civilization 6 standing at 7 total categories won, heading into our final category, which I have deemed Extra. So we'll get into that as our final category. I chose to add this Extra because I wanted to talk about a few other very critical things that I think are important in 4X strategy. Maybe some of these things are only important to me, maybe they're important to other people as well, but I wanted them to be considered in our comparison and in our ranking. The first in the Extra category that I want to talk about is win conditions. In Humankind, win conditions are not actual win conditions. The win condition is a singular thing in Humankind, and this is where both games differ in very drastic ways again. To win a game of Humankind, you end the game with the most fame. You earn fame through multiple different ways, but mainly through era stars. You get fame for having money, you get fame for influence, you get fame for military conquering, you get fame for expansion, diplomacy, science, all of the different categories that fame can be accrued in through stars. You get fame for building wonders, you get fame for building the first to do certain things, and you accrue fame over the course of the game. That is the only win condition in Humankind. Whoever has the most fame at the end wins the game. Now, there are different end game conditions within Humankind. How you end a game of Humankind is different. You can win this, you can not win. You can complete the space race first and choose to end the game. You can research all the techs. You can get all of the fame stars in the final era, the contemporary era. You can end based on pollution. You can end based on vassalizing or exterminating everybody, or you can end based on just exterminating everybody and you being the last person alive on the map. Those are all end game conditions. So if I said win, which I always do, those are all end game conditions. They will end a game of Humankind. But the only way to win is to get the most fame. On the flip side, in Civilization 6, there are completely separate and distinct win conditions, and every civilization within the game may be going for a different win condition. This creates very different perceptions on how to try to win a game. Humankind, you're always kind of playing in one direction for fame, while how you attain that fame is going to be drastically different from game to game based on who you're playing and what cultures you choose and what the map kind of presents you with. In Civilization, you have this, I feel like this nuance of again, that sense of a race. The same thing we talked about with Wonders. There's a race to a science victory. There's a race to a culture victory, and you're really up against other science-based civs. You're up against other culture-based civs, but also you have to get to your science win before they get to their culture win. There's a win condition that you drive towards, and that becomes very specific for different civilizations that you're playing and for different, situations that a map presents you with, opportunities to, go for more of a culture win, to go for more of a science win, to go for the religion win, to go for the diplomacy win, to go for the domination win, right? There are set win conditions in Civilization that you kind of goal for from the outset of the game. On one hand, that makes it very kind of singularly driven. It creates some sense of boredom potentially within Civilization 6 because you're always picking one of those to go for and then going for it. I don't think there really is any boredom involved in that because there's so many different ways to get to those particular win conditions. In Humankind, you also get a sense of boredom from that every time it's just fame. It's fame every time, and the ways you get fame don't particularly change every game, and so you might be going for similar things. How you get there is going to be drastically different, but you have this whole kind of sense of we're just getting fame in Humankind. And in Civilization, we're just getting these specific win conditions. This one was relatively close for me, but I do think that Civilization takes the cake here. There are just more ways to play almost, even though that feels weird to say because you can do a lot more different things in Humankind. The fame I loved the idea of fame when I first heard about it, and I still love playing Humankind because it's built around that. But the different win conditions of Civilization, and they've got the religion win condition, you've got a couple of different options to kind of go towards in Civilization 6. I think that Civilization 6 takes this category. I don't want to say I like it better than Humankind, but I think that there are more options and it's a little bit more strategic necessarily, possibly within those. I like the sense of that race to your win conditions. You don't necessarily get that in Humankind necessarily. So I'm going to give this category to Civilization 6. The next segment I want to talk about is AI. AI is important in 4X strategy games because a lot of people play 4X strategy games primarily as single-player games. We're going to talk about multiplayer in the very next section, but AI is an important topic to talk about within these games. Now, AI in Civilization 6 is relatively straightforward. The AI are based off of the personalities of the civilizations that are presented, and the AI make decisions basically in almost the same exact way every time, and they have improved the way AI make decisions over the course of time, but even in the sense of difficulty levels for AI, Civilization 6 just gives AI different bonuses at the beginning. They don't actually change the way they make decisions based on anything that you're giving them as far as difficulty is concerned. Humankind, on the other hand, introduced a concept that is one of my favorite parts of Humankind, and that is that if you play mostly single player, you can create an AI persona of how you play the game based on what you choose to kind of prioritize maybe in a general game of Humankind, and you can upload that into the Games Together website, and your friends, anyone, can actually download your AI and then play against your AI, in a game that they're playing of Humankind. It is immensely fun to go against members of the community, to go against your friends, to go against popular content creators within your game and see their AI act as if they would in game. And it is uncanny how well the AI actually does this in Humankind. They have done a fantastic job of giving those AI personas just the right amount of flexibility and different decision-making paths that they really do feel like they're playing the way that that player would play in the game. If you've played against people in real life and then you play against their AI they've created, if they've done a good job of it, it really does a good job mimicking that. I think the AI in Humankind is far superior to the AI in Civilization. It gives a real nuanced effect. I've seen the AI make really interesting decisions based on the AI personalities that have been inputted into a game. And I think that at the difficulty level rating, it gives the AI makes smarter choices as the difficulty level changes, it feels like, in Humankind, as opposed to just being given kind of a baseline benefit in Civilization 6. So the category of AI goes to Humankind. The next category is multiplayer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this. I don't play a ton of multiplayer. Here's what I know about multiplayer. In Humankind, it is incredibly stable. I've played a lot of multiplayer off stream. I don't play a lot on stream, but off stream I play a lot of multiplayer, not with a lot of players, but with a couple different people, and it is incredibly stable. We do not crash, we do not have problems, and it flows very nicely. Even the turn-based part of combat, which we talked about, flows nicely into multiplayer games. You don't get advantages for clicking faster necessarily in Humankind when you get to combat. So, but honestly, for me, it's mainly the stability issue with multiplayer. It's stable, it plays really fun, it plays just like it would otherwise. I think multiplayer in Humankind is a blast. On the other hand, in Civilization 6, multiplayer is incredibly unstable. To this day, even two people playing multiplayer Humankind can have trouble. If you add 3, 4, 5 people into a game, you almost have to have mods to make it work. The problem then is the mods then also make it less stable potentially, and then over and above that, the multiplayer community in Civilization 6 has basically deemed that they don't like the way the game plays. They have mods that actually change all of the civilizations, right? They rebalanced the game around multiplayer. And so I'm giving this category to Humankind, honestly, solely on the fact that it is stable. You can play multiplayer and not crash out or have desyncs every other turn. So that's the reason why I'm going to give multiplayer to Humankind in this one. Again, if you're playing modded Civilization 6 and you're getting into the stuff with the CPL and things like that, obviously, like, you might switch this over into Civ 6, but if we're looking at vanilla game, stability is going to take the cake for me in multiplayer. I just want to be able to play without going through loading screen after loading screen. Humankind is going to win that against Civilization 6 every time. The final category that I have is immersion, and this encompasses a whole bunch of potential different things, but I wanted to talk about immersion primarily because I want to encompass a couple of different pieces into that. Things like graphics, things like specific things like events within Humankind. How immersive is the game? And now this is a slightly unfair category, I will give you that. So if you want to toss this one out as far as the numbers are concerned, feel free. Because immersion does tend to improve as you get a newer game. Humankind is only 2 years old. Civilization 6 is much, much older than that. I think we've approached, past 7 years old at this point. And so, yes, graphically, Humankind is gorgeous. It is a great look. Civ 6 looks great. I preferred Civ 5 graphics. That's just me. Like a lot of people are in that boat. Humankind graphics are phenomenal. The game looks beautiful. It sounds beautiful. You've got great music. Civilization 6 has fantastic music as well. If you're comparing music to music, you might actually give the edge to Civilization 6 just on the music, but that one would be close for me. But from a graphical immersion standpoint, Humankind really has an edge just from being a new game. The other big thing with immersion that I want to talk about is the events in Humankind. Based on what you're doing, the stability level of your cities, decisions that you make, events will pop up in game that influence things like research, they influence FIMS, they influence stability, they influence civics. And those events are really immersive. They really bring you into the game in a very real way. Things happen to your empire that are scripted based off of actual actions that are taken in game, things that happen, right? You don't get, access to certain civics even without certain events triggering because you took certain actions. Those types of immersive things that Humankind has really puts you in that immersive, full package deal. When those events pop up, I absolutely love the events in Humankind. It just brings the whole feeling of the game together because it's all based on what's happening in game, and you don't trigger each event every time. You get certain events based on what's happening in the world, based on decisions that you make. I absolutely love that. Do those events need to be balanced across different eras? Yes, there still needs to be some balance implemented on Amplitude's side from, having to pay 500 gold late game to avoid some sort of bad penalty. You're like, whatever, it's 500 gold. I'm making 2,000 per turn. 500 gold is not an impact on me. Little balance things could help with that, but Civilization 6, you've got disasters and you've got other things you've got heroes and you've got the secret societies. You've got things that Civ 6 brings to the table here from an immersion perspective or from an additional content perspective. But I really think the events in Humankind, the graphical components, the different levels of nuance that Humankind has from an immersion capacity, I give this category to Humankind. And that brings our final totals on Humankind versus Civ 6 to this. A final score: 12 categories went Humankind's way, 8 categories went Civilization 6's way. 12-8 is the final score. That's very close in my mind. And again, some of these categories were razor thin. I was making these decisions and I was thinking, man, this could go either way. It came to my personal preference, right? Again, these are unweighted categories. I mentioned this before, but some people are going to weight different parts of 4X strategy games much higher than others. And so if you weight one of the categories that Civ 6 won higher than Humankind, that would obviously flip your scales. All of this to say, I love both of these games. As you can see from the final results, there are things about Civilization 6 that I absolutely love and that definitely take the cake over Humankind for me. There are things about Humankind that I absolutely love and definitely take the cake over Civ 6 for me. They're great games. Like I said at the beginning, there's a reason why I play both of these games every week. They're both fantastic entries into the 4X strategy genre. They give you similar but very different gameplay styles, a different feel. It feels great to juxtaposition one with the other. I love playing Civ 6 on Mondays and Humankind on Fridays because it gives me a full immersion into the 4X strategy genre that doesn't feel repetitive. And that's the beauty of these two games together, is that one of them didn't try to imitate the other. One of them didn't try to be the other. They're their own games. They're their own thing. And that is what we want in any genre of video game, but specifically in the 4X genre of video games. That is what we want. We want diversity in the types of games we can play. We don't want them to feel exactly like the other one. We want them to feel different. That's definitely accomplished through these two games. So my encouragement to you is play what you like. And if you enjoy Humankind, play it. If you enjoy Civ 6, play it. Does there really need to be so much comparison between these two games? Personally, I don't think so. However, in the spirit of comparison, those are my thoughts on Humankind versus Civ 6. You will continue to see both of these games on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/MadishMoose and on this YouTube channel until Civ 7 comes out, and then we'll be playing Humankind and Civ 7, and maybe we make another comparison video at that point. But for now, I leave you with those thoughts. If you have different thoughts on what you like about different games, or maybe things that I didn't consider that you think would be important, I'm by no means perfect, and this was by no means meant to be kind of an all-encompassing, like, definitive statement on 4X genre gaming, and it's obviously only two games in that particular genre. So if you want to, leave some comments below. If you like the content, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Civ 6 and Humankind content. There's a bunch of it out there already, and I'll continue releasing Humankind and Civ 6 content, again, until the next versions of those games come out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.